Okay, so this is going to be more of a philosophical conversation about some of the top prospects in this year's NHL Draft. I think it goes without saying that the Vancouver Canucks, my favorite team, regrettably, are the number one frontrunner for the first overall pick. They have a 25.5% chance at the time of recording this audio, and they are the worst team in the NHL by far. 37 points in 45 games with a .411 points percentage. Second worst has a .443. Thank you for winning some games, Winnipeg. But with the Vancouver Canucks being in prime first overall conversation territory, it opens the door as to whom it is this team can take at the draft. I wanted to focus on Ivar Stenberg. I also wanted to talk about Gavin McKenna and the underdog nature that is Tynan Lawrence and his profile. This isn't a Why I Want video, but it's going to talk about just some of the conversations going around these guys. Before we dive into all that, though, let's talk about the consolidated rankings for 2026 prospects. So you can see right here, this is the average ranking for all of these guys, courtesy of Elite Prospects. Gavin McKenna is still the consolidated number one. Whether or not consolidated means unanimous is absolutely not the case, though. McKenna is ranked number 2 by some of these outlets on Sportsnet, in particular Bukala and Constantino. He is now ranked 3rd overall by the Hockey News and Tony Ferrari. They have Tynan Lawrence and Ivar Stenberg ahead of McKenna. But if you head over to the consolidated list, you'll also see Keaton Verhoff out of the North Dakota Fighting Hawks over here too. Ivar Stenberg is 3rd, and then Tynan Lawrence is 4th. Now, I do think that Verhoff is the wild card here because he is a defenseman, and Vancouver, for what it's worth, I would be surprised if they went with a defenseman at the top of their draft pick, mostly because they already have Bouillon, they already have Mancini, they have Wilander, they have Elias Pettersson. I can understand if they don't necessarily think drafting a D-man would be the best pick there. But any one of these guys, I think, would be intriguing to talk about. Ivar Stenberg, of course, gold medal winner at the World Juniors. He has been a point-per-game player for Frölunda HC in the SHL, which is ridiculous for a guy who's only 18. He is producing some of the best SHL numbers we have seen in years out of a junior player, let alone a guy who is still undrafted and draft eligible. That is out of this world ridiculous. Gavin McKenna had what I think a lot of people would call a very decent World Juniors, and I say that fully knowing that he was a double point per game guy. The issue was, though, he got his points against teams that weren't really all too impressive, and McKenna's overall attitude and penalties. There was such a bad taste left in Canadian fans' mouths after watching Gavin McKenna as an 18-year-old go out there and score the points and play the game that he did at Team Canada's showcase at the World Juniors. I mean, it was not really a great showing for the projected first overall pick. He didn't look like a guy that deserved to be first. And then Tynan Lawrence is 17, and he is a center, playing for Boston University right now in the collegiate scene. He was over a point per game with Muskegon, but now he's got 0 points in 3 NCAA games. Keep these names in mind as we continue with this video, because this is what Thomas Drance went out there and said about Vancouver and where it is they're putting their emphasis on in their scouting. He said, "I think that the club views Ivar Stenberg as the more pro-ready prospect among the elite wingers at the top of this draft class. I also think that Vancouver's severe positional need for quality centers will cause Canucks scouts to monitor Lawrence's progress at BU very closely." Now that, of course, might shock some Canucks fans. It might scare some Canucks fans. In fact, it might actually encourage others. Tynan Lawrence is a center, and he is what these other two guys, McKenna and Stenberg, are not. A face-off guy who could be down the middle for a Canucks team that's already struggling down the middle. Elias Pettersson is not that great anymore. Marco Rossi is admittedly hurt. So Vancouver putting some emphasis on Tynan Lawrence, a guy who is ranked by some of these folks as low as number 13. He's ranked as high as number 2 by other scouting outlets. This is a player whose overall evaluation is all over the place. But he still hasn't put it together yet in the NCAA. I get it, he's a young dude. He's only 17, one of the youngest players in the draft. In fact, he's only a month and a half away from eligibility for 2027's draft. But I guess for Tynan Lawrence, Vancouver's need for centers will place him at the top of their to-check-out list versus a McKenna or a Stenberg, who are already highly touted prospects as wingers. Speaking about the Stenberg-McKenna debate, this is what Sapster went out there and said on Twitter: "When I watch Gavin McKenna, the closest comparable I can give is Nikita Kucherov. When I watch Stenberg, the closest comp I can come up with is Marian Hossa. I would love other people's opinions on this." Jack Hahn said that McKenna is like Patrick Kane. That's good too. Essentially saying that McKenna is more of a smart, perimeter, outside playmaker who is able to find really good seams and create plays out of nothing. Stenberg drives play forward more, and as a power forward-like guy who can just snipe the puck, who can do the right things on and off the ice, who also has a good attitude back-checking, there's a lot to like out of Ivar Stenberg as a top prospect. Might I remind you too, Marian Hossa was like a 90-point player multiple times, so obviously there is a lot to like out of that profile. For what it's worth, though, some of the replies go out there and talk about the differences. Marian Hossa, the 6'2", 200-pound, big-scoring winger with a great shot? Stenberg is a playmaking winger with a clear pass-first mentality, and the big thing is he can play in his own pace successfully and control the pace. The comparison is way off, this user says. The comparison in my mind is a winger who excels in the interior with a great motor, a great puck possessor who is responsible defensively and has some of the same puck transition ability as a lot of first-line centers. It's never truly apples to apples, but that's what popped into Sap's head. And to give an argument for Tynan Lawrence, this is what Tyson Cole went out there and said: "I would argue that the Canucks have more of a need for game-breaking offensive players than a positional need for a center. If Tynan Lawrence performs well after joining the NCAA and proves that he deserves to be part of the conversation, then sure. But if that doesn't happen, don't get cute. Just draft the best player available." And in many folks' eyes, the best player available is the same guy that we've been talking about for years as potentially being that dude. Gavin McKenna, Penn State University Nittany Lions guy, former WHL absolute rocket of a superstar, for lack of a better term. And this is what Sap went out there and said as well: "If you are a Canucks fan who is holding on to hope that Connor Bedard someday comes to here, you should be begging for Gavin McKenna to be a Canuck, regardless of your opinion on his lack of interior play. Also, with the NCAA potentially allowing players on ELCs to play as long as they haven't made a certain amount of money, you can allow Gavin McKenna to play at Penn State without worrying about an Adam Fox-type situation." Now, I do think that the rules in the NCAA changing make this a lot more interesting than if they were just the same as before, but I also see a situation like this and I think, would Vancouver draft Gavin McKenna first overall if they knew that he wasn't going to play in Vancouver right away? Would they be okay with an entire Owen Power situation playing out where a guy gets drafted first and then doesn't go to the NHL at the same time? It's really nitpicky, but I do think that with some of these other first overall picks starting to show the value that they have, from Bedard to Celebrini to Schaefer, it does get a little bit fishy when you see a guy like that, Gavin McKenna, get taken first and then maybe go back to college, even though it's probably the right move depending on who you ask. I just question where you might say Vancouver lies when thinking about this first overall debate. So I'll open the floor to y'all in the comments section below. Let me know what you think about Ivar Stenberg, Gavin McKenna, Tynan Lawrence. Which one of these guys do you think is the most appropriate for the Vancouver Canucks to take, assuming they go best player available? Totally assuming they just don't go for Lawrence because he's a center. How do you feel about the Canucks and their draft situation heading into June? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.